Hi guys and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk a bit about my process with painting the line work in watercolors. It's a technique that I've been really excited about figuring out and learning for the last couple of months, and I think I've learned a pretty good amount of stuff of how to actually handle it and how to incorporate it into the way that I like to paint. So I figured I'd go ahead and talk a bit about the process that goes into that and a little bit of the general watercoloring process that I took for this piece. But yeah, just a little bit of context. If you didn't know, I used to always do my line work with micron pens, which are waterproof. I would do that first and then paint it kind of like a coloring book. But I started feeling very stifled with that. Like I was put into a box and I wanted to be able to work on the piece in a much more live kind of a way, where as I was working on it I could adapt it and push it and pull it where I wanted it to be, and I wanted to have much more control over the colors for the lines. So I decided to go down a path of figuring out if I could use other mediums to create a colored line work, like with colored pens or with ink and brush. And eventually I found that I was most happy with my results with actually using watercolors to do the line work. It definitely comes with some cons that you have to work around, but it has just so many benefits that in the end I decided this really was the right avenue for me. It had the most amount of benefits that I really wanted compared to the least amount of cons. So for me, the cons with doing the line work with watercolors is that it can restrict how many layers I can do on top of it afterwards. Some paints are so easy to reactivate. So if I put any water near the line work again, it will smudge and bleed out into that top layer. Other paints I can actually paint right on top of it and it'll stick pretty well to that place that I put it in. And that's really just key to understanding your own pigments and how they react. And that way you can know which paints will work best if you maybe plan on needing to do more glazes on top, or if you want to specifically focus on using certain paints for your line work because they're more staining to the paper. But that was the biggest drawback moving over to this, is that I'm not able to just layer on top of layer on top of layer as much as I used to, at least not in the same orders. Of course I can do as many layers as I want on that base and then do the line work at the very end, but sometimes I like to be able to add the line work as I'm working on an area and then let other areas be line worked as I'm painting it and figuring it out. So there are things that I have to consider a little bit more than before, but really I find that it just means that I need to be a little bit more thoughtful about it and see more into the future of where I think it's going to end up and when it's time to start adding in that line work. It also took a lot of practice to get anywhere close to feeling like I had control over the brush that I was using to get these consistent thin lines. That was quite a struggle at the beginning. I actually use a brush that's called a liner brush, so it's really thin but also very long. And I've found that I have a certain technique for how I like to hold the brush, how I pick up the pigment onto the brush before I start painting the lines with it. So I like to take the brush, that really long, thin liner brush, and I'll actually like twirl it into the puddle of paint that I have. That way it unifies all the bristles and creates this like more tightly spiraled point to the brush, and that brings again all the bristles together and it helps it to become much more precise. And then as I'm using it on my paper, I line up the brush so that the handle is pointing towards where I'm going to be painting it, and then I line up the brush so that it just lines up straight with that line that I'm going to paint, and then that allows me to just drag it out and it keeps this consistent line to it. And I found that I had to be really careful with when I lifted it up at the end, because it can flick when it's coming up and then it flicks off in some strange direction. It has these little loose hairs at the end. So that was just something that I had to be a little bit more aware of, is how I tapered off the ends so that I could rearrange my hand and make sure that I was lined up for the next section of the line. But over just being more aware of what kind of hand movements have what kind of effect, I've been able to really hone that in and figure out how to do that a lot better. And for mixing the colors, I do have to take certain considerations into account when I'm mixing it up. So when I'm working on my washes for my watercolors, I always prefer them to be transparent because it allows those glazes before it to really shine through. It allows the paper to shine through too, and it creates this really beautiful glazing effect with the watercolors. But when it comes to doing the lines, I actually want to prioritize the opaqueness of some of the paints. That allows the line work to cover up the more raw, rougher edges, and then it just sharpens it and cleans it up. And for it to really do that well, the line needs to be as opaque as possible. So I found a few different techniques. The first one, when I'm working on areas that would need a lighter line, I actually draw from some of my more opaque paints, there we go, that are more on the pastel side. So I have a teal and I have a lavender one that they are very opaque compared to my other colors. But if I mix that in and I create this mixture that has that as the base, then it allows it to really cover up, again, those layers underneath, and it really sharpens it and cleans it up. If I don't do that and I just go in with a normal wash that's mixed to the color that I want, it ends up still being very transparent, so then you can see those two raw edges meeting together and then this transparent line on top, so it ends up being quite a bit messier looking than I'd like. And then when I'm going into areas that need to be darker, I'm able to just mix more of the pigment into that mixture, so there's less water into it, and that allows it to really be very opaque. So if I'm making like a dark red line work, then I'm able to just mix in a lot of that really rich red paint, and then I can have the sharp, clean line. I'm really happy with this effect because I've been able to get the kind of colors that I've wanted, the ones that I've had to really find and search for when it came to inks, and now I'm able to just mix them up and get them exactly what I want, and they match the colors that I used elsewhere. And I'm also able to create really interesting effects with going from very dark line work and then fading it into lighter line work as things fade into the background. And I think that's really key of why I decided to go down this path, is because it opens things up so much more for me to be able to adapt it to what I actually want to show. So like for her hair, I made sure the areas that were right around her face or closer to the viewer, those were lined in a darker color, that really rich black color, and they were sharp and clean. And then some of the areas of her hair that were behind her shoulder and flowing away, those were lined with a lighter gray color. So then they do look like they're receding into the background, and that just really helps sell the idea that I'm trying to show in my pieces. I am just so excited about this whole process of doing line work with my watercolors. It really has refreshed my approach to watercolors in a way that just makes me so excited to start a new piece and figure it out and learn more about it. There is just so much that I have to learn about this, which is exciting. It feels like I'm moving forward and I'm figuring things out and making progress with being able to make things look better, which is always my goal. I think the next biggest thing that I really need to focus on is just getting more confident with my brush strokes for creating the line work. I'm much more comfortable with it than I was at the beginning. I've done so much practice to really understand how to control the brush, which I highly suggest if you're thinking about doing line work with a brush, whether it's with the watercolors or with ink, is to sit down and just do as many strokes with the brush as you can. Figure out how it behaves, how to hold it, how to use it, the right amount of pressure, the right speed to use it at. There's just so much that once you really figure it out, you can make much more confident strokes. But again, there is so much that I need to learn and practice with being confident with it. I find that I move quite a bit slower when it comes to doing that than I think I would like. I mean, I'd like to be able to get things to feel a little bit more lively and expressive with just that moment of creating the line. So yes, I will be doing a lot more little sheets to practice that, to practice the technique of applying the lines. And that is it for today. I do have this original painting at my shop if you'd like to check that out. There's a link in the description. And I also have a link to my Patreon. I do want to give a huge thank you to my patrons. Like always, you guys are just so incredible, and your support means the absolute world to me. This is actually going to be a sticker that's sent out to my patrons from last month, from January, on the very top tier. So if you'd like to go check out Patreon and potentially sign up for a postcard or any of the other tiers, those are over there. But yeah, that's it for this week. I'll be back next week with another art video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you then.